one of the things that we set out to do during COVID was try to rethink the way that we could connect more people to the habits of mind. Because one of the things that had been happening pre-COVID was that people were coming to conferences, specifically the pre-conferences where Borne Art especially put on a lot of pre-conference habits of mind sessions. But with COVID shutting all those conferences down, there was suddenly one of the main avenues of connecting people to the habits completely gone. So we sat down and started asking, how can we reconnect people? And we started thinking, everything's going on Zoom. What if we started to asynchronously provide opportunities for people to come in and explore the habits in different ways? Explore by forming connections through cohorts that might meet on Zoom or Kumo Space or potentially other sites that allow for people wherever they are in the world to start connecting around this wonderful idea of the habits of mind. And so what I thought we could do was, rather than me just tell you about this, 3 wonderful people agreed for some reason to work with me to share their experiences as individual practitioners. And all 3 of these wonderful people are now certified as individual practitioners. So first and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you.
Secondly, using their voices, here's a chance for them to explain what that experience was like. So you get that first-hand perspective rather than a facilitator's perspective of what that might look like. So I'm just going to ask them a few questions, and at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for you to ask your questions as well. And in that way, hopefully you can learn a little bit more about what we can do to become individual practitioners, and also spread the word. Hopefully get out to more people that there are these ways to connect people around the world. So first question, or first idea, would you just share who you are, where it is that you work, and give people kind of an idea of what the habits of mind are to you.
So I'm Pam Seeger. Nice to meet everyone here. And I am from Pennsylvania, and I actually went through the program with Michelle. And so I think and then what I do, I'm currently an interim executive director from a school in South Carolina, Carolus Online Academy, and currently an interim assistant principal at the school, and then I'm also a PAA, which is a portfolio academic administrator. I work for K-12 Stride, which is an online school across the United States and then also nationally, globally. And for me, habits of mind, honestly, I would say a lifesaver. I used habits of mind, obviously, to build my own effective skills and what I could do at the time. I was working with gifted students, so what I could do to help them grow, but also I found how inspiring it was for me that I had absolutely no clue about the 16 habits, how to use them in my own life. So I used it as almost a social, emotional journey of my own, and really a spiritual journey in my own self reflection.
Yeah, I'm Michelle Hughes, and I am an educator, a long-time teacher and school leader, and I was in hot pursuit of habits of mind for a few years, trying to figure out how to connect with it. And then finally Michelle DeBellis got in touch with me and said, finally we actually have an individual practitioner program happening, and I was so excited. So previous to that, I had been finding materials and bringing them into advisories, because advisories were, I was the director of a middle school, and the teachers were really looking for material, stuff to do with these kids. And habits of mind became kind of the frame for our advisories, which was amazing. And then I left that school to work for myself, and I'm now working for myself, working with habits of mind in coursework with teachers through our local teacher center, and also with one-on-one individual coaching. And it's all really because it wasn't, I think it was just not an accident that all of us went through the individual practitioner program reflecting so heavily on ourselves. There was so much opportunity given to us to do that and really think about that. And I think it really transformed how I see myself and how I see myself as an educator and how I see my work with students, adult, child, and everywhere in between.
I'm Rusty Ito from Santa Barbara, up north, about a few hours. I'm an assistant principal at a TK through 6th grade school. We're fortunate enough to be a certified habits of mind school, so we've had about a 15 to 20 year journey of having habits of mind on our campus, and had the privilege of having Art and Benna come and certify us in 2016, so it's been great, and I wish I would have had the habits as a kid with that language and the framework growing up. Anyone can benefit from it, and just the self-reflection as an adult, and personally and then professionally too. It's been fantastic. So to be at a school that really supports and helps the habits flourish with students and with staff and families, I feel very fortunate, and lucky enough to go through the program with Craig, and it's been fantastic.
And so, again, as a member of this group, maybe from the opposite lens of facilitator, my journey actually started in 1996 in New Orleans when I met Art and Benna at an ASCD conference. They were doing a session on the habits of mind. And what was so strange, we sent a whole team down to New Orleans that year for that conference. And we didn't really do anything strategically. We just said, go and enjoy, figure out the conference. All 8 of us ended up in this room with Art and Benna.
Oh, wow.
But we didn't even know. We were spaced all throughout, because this again was a huge, huge conference, huge room. And as everybody was leaving, we started recognizing that we were all in the room together. And we started talking, what would it be like if we had a space where every single teacher was working with the students in a way where the language became the way that we thought, and it started helping everybody to learn. And it didn't take hold. And we were bummed, because all 8 of us were so inspired by this. So it turned out that, again in 2000, I met Benna and thought, well, this is the chance. This is the time that will make a difference in our school. And it didn't happen. I'm gonna sneeze, I'm sorry. So in 2000, excuse me, 11, finally I got connected with Alison Zamuda and really started working with her. She started coming out to this district, and we had this opportunity to start meeting, and that's when I was reconnected with Benna, 2016. So about the last 8 years, we've had this opportunity to start growing it here in Vista as well. And one of the things that these people don't know yet is we went to schools across the country to see what it looked like in action. And we ended up in this place called Furr High School. Furr High School in Houston, Texas, had a principal named Birdie. And if you ever look at studies about how principals impact schools, you'll see this trajectory upwards always. The longer that a principal stays at a site, the more impact they have. It's because of Birdie. She was at that site for over 30 years, and she showed this outlier of the impact that she had at her site. So while all the other data seems to be flat, her data point alone causes this upward trend at the end. That's how impactful she was. And she brought the habits of mind to the school site. And they created this thing called the learnery? Something along those lines, where students could go to get help with the habits of mind when a problem presented itself. And one time this girl and another girl got into a fight, and Birdie was sharing this with pride, and she has this very thick southern drawl. So if I start mimicking her, please recognize it's out of respect, not out of me trying to make fun of the drawl. And she said that this girl came in and they talked it out, and they said the final component was pick a habit of mind to think about so that you can continue on through the day in a positive way. And this girl said, okay, I'm going to think about my thinking to make sure that I'm really cognizant of the ideas going in my head so I can calm down. Later in the day, the girl was back in, it's called the thinkery. That's what it was, the thinkery. Came back to the thinkery, and they said, well, why are you back? We thought you had figured it out. And the girl said, yeah, I chose thinking about my thinking, but the more I think about it, the more angrier I get. I need to pick a new habit of mine to figure this out. And that's kind of become the purpose behind my work, is because that's what we really want. Not just for them to randomly select a habit of mind, but be so aware of what the habits are that they can pick and choose to make sure that they approach life in a more positive and thoughtful way. And so here's my question for the three of you. As you think about some of the highlights of your own experience, which one or two experiences really stand out as those that have made an impact on you within the individual practitioner lens, or through the individual practitioner lens?
You want to start us off this time?
Okay. I don't know if it's one or two specifically, but just some of the final presentations, the process of getting to the presentation was much more valuable than the actual product itself. Because, so we're a TK through 6 single school district, and so it's just us. Being able to have the network of habit of mind practitioners is amazing, and with the cohort it was fantastic, and such a great opportunity to realize how important the work is and bounce those ideas off of your colleagues. But as a self-reflective process, creating some of those presentations really helped me reflect on the successes and struggles of getting to the point that we were at, and about my practice as an educator. So I think just actually in general, not just specifically, but those really helped the reflective process and that self-assessment piece.
So we, at the end of every 6 weeks, you can see up behind them, there's the awareness badge, and implementation badge, and assessment badge. What I think you're referring to is, at the end of the awareness badge, there was a Pixar story presentation, and it was the reflection that led up to your creation that was so
Yes.
impactful. Gotcha. Thanks.
So there's, I have a 3-year-old grandson, but at the time, he was 18 months, and we had to do a project. I can't remember whether it was awareness or it was, but anyway, it was in one of the projects where we had to really reflect on development and the habits of mind. And I started to take pictures of my grandson doing different things around the house, and my daughter and I started to really look at the 16 habits and observe Elijah through the lens of these 16 habits, and we were really shocked to see that really he possessed 12 of the 16 habits just naturally. And I started to really consider what is the developmental trajectory of the habits of mind, but also I think the thing that we really talked about was, if we're born with all of these, what happens to us? You know, how are we trained out of our own natural habits of mind, and why do we need to then relearn them? And you know, how could education do better? In particularly early childhood, but also all the way through elementary, you know, how can we affirm and help the kid to see their own habits of mind? So anyway, that was a pretty profound revelation for me.
I remember a lot of our discussions about your grandson and
Yeah.
how you saw them
as he was playing out these ideas. That was really
Yeah.
some of the best conversations I've had.
Nice.
Just natural of the habits of mind.
Yeah, thank you.
So I definitely have two. One, unlike him, I realized that I was not a master of any of the 16 habits, and that I had an awful lot of growing to do. And, and what you said, I think life happens, innately, hopefully we are born with these 16 habits, but things happen in our lives that negate us being able to move forward and to cultivate our own internal growth and sense of well-being. And so I think for me, what was helpful is that I realized, Pam, you don't know any of these 16, maybe just a little bit, but that's okay, because even though you're 1,000 years old, you're gonna learn and grow. And then I was able to take that back with the gifted students that I was working with. So essentially for me, what was powerful is that I was learning about these 16 habits of mine at the same time that I was working with the students. And so we all had these awe-inspiring aha moments together. And we were learning and growing together. So I think for me that was very beautiful. The other thing though, and I know you will attest to this, I know you will attest to this, I used it as also, and I do mean used it because I really needed it in that particular time of my life, and I still do. I don't think I had a dry eye anytime I went into our meetings. I cried, I ugly cried, I tried to calm myself crying, and it's because I was in a group of people that were so loving and so kind and so beautiful, and I had a lot of struggles, and I really was not thinking flexibly. I was a pain in the rear end, to be honest, and I think that, we talk about having this growth mindset. I was very fixed in some ways. And so for me, what was beautiful is having a very supportive group of people who cared about me and that I cared back, that we were able to grow together, and they helped me through so many processes. And I mean, Craig was always available, nights, mornings, weekends, whatever, and I would call him up crying, oh, this happened at work. I don't know how to get through it. And just giving me the skills to be able to work through those situations in real time was just incredibly helpful. And so, I still feel like a child with habits of mine. And even though it's been quite some time, I'm still learning and growing.
Well, I would just say one thing, and that is that I think that what your genuineness in those situations allowed everybody else to be genuine too, and to be vulnerable and to talk about the things they were struggling with at work, or how they were struggling with certain habits of mind for themselves. I think it was really alchemy. I do.
Oh, thank you.
I think you just answered your own question about what happens to our
Yes.
habits, because what
Yeah.
we do frequently, unfortunately, is when students start school, we expect them to be complacent. We expect them to follow along. We expect them to obey the rules and sit still and be quiet when someone else is talking. And so therefore, that innate ability to be genuine is sort of chipped away. And that's been my biggest beef since 32 years ago when I started in education. Why does it have to be that format and that regime to keep kids in control, quote
Yeah.
unquote? And I
Yeah.
think that that's a huge part of it.
Were you in the other session,
Yeah.
across the way, action research? So you saw the two pictures that they compared and contrasted together?
Yeah.
Where the students were being asked, like, paint a picture of what learning looks like for you, and then the one student who was in this really progressive school that they were sharing in the district shared all these beautiful images of students learning truly differentiation, right? And then another child had this teacher in the front, and then my mom said, did you read that, blah, 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 like that Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
And then all these students were in these really rigid seats and rigid rows and everything else like that. So it's
I
very
wasn't in
interesting.
that one, I was in the other one, but
Yeah.
I apologize, I thought you meant.
No, that's okay. But it's
No,
it's that
it's-
student's perspective.
It's hard, and I think, I was telling Rusty, my son is a grown-up, he's an adult now, but he's high-functioning autistic, and to watch what he went through. We were traveling the world. We were in, my husband and I are both educators. We were in education internationally at top tier international schools for his entire high school career. He graduated with an IB diploma. It wasn't about the education. It's about that semblance of who we are and acknowledging who we are and making who we are work for us and for others around us. And I think that that's where we're just so misguided sometimes in the traditional form.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Well, speaking of traditional form, look at the classroom that we're in. It has flexible furniture organized in rows and columns. Not trying to in any way put down the teacher, it's become so ingrained in us through our learning processes, and we often teach the way that we were taught. That's what all the research seems to continually point to. If you had a very robust way of learning, that was more the way you started your teaching career. If it was very compliant driven, then this is the result. And Rancho, the school we're at, just received this type of flexible furniture. So they're very much in that beginning stage of how do we start incorporating these ideas of thinking flexibly, thinking interdependently in a much more robust way. And so I bet if we came back at the same time next year, this furniture would be set up completely differently because they'll have that time to really better understand it. So my next question, as part of the groups, the cohorts, what surprised you as you were engaged with the program? That might be personal, that might be within the educational spheres that you were working in. Just really want to get some insight into the surprises that happened to you along the way.
So I think very kind of practically and superficially, what I was really surprised at was, I mean, it wasn't so superficial, was just the wide variety of people in the cohort and where they were from, you know, South Africa to Saudi Arabia to, you know, all across the country, to Romania, right? We really had this incredibly diverse group, and that was really exciting. That was really exciting, and that was one of the things about learning through Zoom, that you could not do that. You could not do that otherwise. The other that thing that was surprising was just how in it everybody was. Everybody in that group was in it, in a deep way, differently, but really talking about practice and really talking about how the habits of mind played out in their teaching practices and in their schools interactions with kids. So I just didn't know what it was going to be, and so those things were delightful surprises for me.
Okay.
Oh boy, I think what was surprising for me, first, Kumo Space is amazing.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's not, I mean, that's just one thing. Love that platform. EduPlanet, love that too. Still do, actually. Ironically, it's in Pennsylvania, so that's pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think what surprised me is that I used to always think that I had so much empathy, you know? And I was such a great listener. And I really learned that probably something that I struggled with the most is that particular one, understanding and having empathy, you know, listening to understand, having empathy toward others, because I think what I was doing is I was focusing on having so much sympathy for people, right? And so I wasn't truly taking a step back to truly listen. And really, I mean, obviously the cohort group that I was in, Craig is a leader facilitator, I learned, but man, when I got home and I started talking with my mom, it's my mom back there, she's here, my beautiful mom, love you. But with her, with my daughters at the time were 17 and 19 years old, and you know what, I realized that I was not listening at all to understand and have empathy, because I was already being so reactive on what I was going to say next, and that, you know, I was listening to respond. And that was really hard for me because I thought, oh yeah, I'm an empath. And you know, we're not necessarily all empaths in nature. It's something that we really have to focus on because things happen in our lives. We may experience trauma, we may experience failure, and we may not be okay with that. And I think because of that, it took me a step back and I saw myself, and boy, it was kind of this ugly realization, but at the same time it was beautiful because I knew and recognized, all right, Pam, you got a lot of work to do, girl, but you're gonna do it. And I had a support system. And I'm here to say right now, I still have a lot of growth in that area. I still have a lot of growth in every single area, and I would arguably say we all do because nothing can be perfect except, but outside of that, I think that was a really harsh moment for me is, wow, Pam, you're a little bit of a hypocrite, but that's okay, you recognize it, and let's grow from here, and just, you know, foster and cultivate that being more open and reflective of other people.
I have to say that completely caught me off guard. I thought for sure you were going to talk about thinking about your thinking, because I remember all the time that you said, I think that's the most important
It is the most
one."
important. I still agree that metacognition to me is the most important because, and I will say that, I feel like there are 16 habits of mind, but there is the mother, the father of it all, and that is metacognition. But you really have to, when you are not able to really be reflective of other people and take other people's feelings and emotions fully into consideration without, like I said, being a hypocrite, that one takes a back door because now you're not being good at thinking flexibly, thinking interdependently, because you're too steadfast at wanting your voice to be heard and your point of view to be heard and fight or flight. And so I think that's my biggest realization. I always knew metacognition was all that in bag of chips and dip, but that empath part of where I really needed to grow and still do really hit home hard.
I love the vulnerability. Thank you for
I'm
just
extremely
sharing and I mean, for both of you. It's great. And the one of the common threads, as you can all hear, is just that personal reflection journey. Two things I was surprised at. One was just in the variety of educators, schools, districts, locations, you know, nationwide, globally, that you get a chance to meet. It was incredibly powerful to be able to connect and learn from other educators around the world and what they do, who they are, how they value and implement habits of mind as professionals and personally. Another thing I was surprised at, I knew I was excited about doing more work with habits of mind. I didn't realize that I would be that excited once you started getting into it and talking with your cohort and working with Craig, and then it was just a refreshing new level of energy. You know, it was like a second wind that it gave you, of motivation, of excitement, of wanting to try new things. So I really appreciate it for that because it really gave me a boost and you know, just trying to think outside the box and try and push and do X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, again, as Michelle and Pam were talking about, just I think I was surprised at how much, this is three things I said.
It's
too.
okay. I still can.
About how much personal stake went into the all the badges and the program too. I was in it as a professional and got an incredible amount of value out of it, and I figured it would benefit me personally, but I didn't think to that degree, you know, as both of you were talking about too, is you take it home with you, and, you know, I'd talk to my wife about it, my kids about it, and just without realizing it became a very powerful personal journey as well and tool, just in at the home front, and so that surprised me as well.
I'm gonna piggyback on that one. So as I was continually learning with the habits of mind, I had a natural guinea pig at home, my son, who to this day hates it, that I say that he's my guinea pig at times. But I was getting so excited listening to all the people in the cohorts because they were generating all these ideas. I think honestly, I've been the one that's benefited the most because I've been able to listen to all these wonderful people think about how it's really impacting not only them, but their practice. And so I would share some of these ideas with my son and start trying to figure out what this might look like, not only with my students, myself, but also with my progeny, who's growing up right now. He was a teenager, still is, and what the habits might be able to do for him. And it got to the point where he, especially during the COVID years, he was learning at home, and he'd be hearing my interactions of the cohorts, and he would say very silently, "Dad, I don't think you're managing your impulsivity very well right now." "Dad, you might want to try that again. You're not thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. They don't know what you're saying." And so it was this great kind of idea, or person on my shoulder idea, that kept me honest and kept me thinking about how to really be the best person I could be as a facilitator for the group. So my last question, in what ways do you feel that your time and efforts in the individual practitioner certification pathway has impacted you and your practice? What are those real outcomes that you now see in yourselves? And Pat, you've already talked about your impact. For you, maybe what other ways have you seen it impact you and your practice?
Well, I use it as often as I possibly can. Actually, it's in my everyday language. I find myself purposefully going back to, I say the vocabulary, but it is really vocabulary, and then it prompts me to really think about what I'm gonna do next and what my behavior is like and how others may perceive me in particular situations. How it's really impacted me is that I now have such a love to spread habits of mind to anyone that I come across. I know it sounds so, as they said earlier, cliche, but really I do, because I think it's uplifting. It's part of building our own social, emotional, and psychosocial intelligence, which is critical, and especially for students. You know, they emulate us. You know, so if we're not in a really healthy place and we're not mindful of assuming and accepting responsibility for our own dispositions or lack thereof, they're going to feed into that, right? And instead of being something positively infectious, it will be quite negative. And so really, my focus now, I have a post that I do every 2 weeks for my work, and I work for K-12 Stride, and we post it through social media, and I'll take one of the habits and talk about it and spread it out there for others to see. But we also have what's called leveraging the power standards, and also leveraging for gifted students and advanced learners too. That's my passion, gifted and advanced students. That's a whole nother thing. And what we do is we take the 16 habits and we teach teachers through this K-12 training about the importance of using habits in their lessons with their students, whether it's SEL lessons, whether it is, you know, curriculum-based, PBLs, anything like that. But being able to take some of the worksheets that you so graciously had available to us from EduPlanet, and then giving them the resources and materials in order to then work with their students. And then right now, because I am an interim, the people that I come across in leadership and then the staff working with the school. So I'm able to work with them and have professional development and training with them circling around the habits of mind. And we may take one habit and they may not even know we're studying that habit, like, you know, thinking flexibly, and working through issues and trying to work together to problem solve. So these are just some of the ways that I've tried to use it in incorporating with my particular position right now where I work. But again, just want to be mindful in saying that yes, that's all important, but it also is so important for us to have it for our own selves. Because I really do think that it helps us to grow. It helps us to take responsibility of things that we're doing that others may not be perceiving in a positive light and working toward improving that. but then things that we are doing well, we can capitalize on them. And then we can show that and demonstrate that and provide evidence of that to others. So I think that's where I would land on it.
Nice. So I'm, went from being a school person for 30-something years to suddenly working in a lot of different capacities in different ways. And it's been really interesting, and sometimes really confusing. And I recently said to a friend of mine who also has made this leap, I just wonder still some days what's so bad about getting up and going to a job? Because it's really hard. But I think that in the different capacities that I'm in, of this one client in the coaching that I do, who at 60 years old, she discovered that she had ADHD. And she, it was one of these things like, oh, now I understand my life, and she had to look back at all of the things that she had done or not done, to move herself in the direction that she always really thought she wanted to go, and what was in the way of that. And so Habits of Mind became a really critical scaffold for her. And she started to really think about how each of these habits fit into her work and her life, and practicing them, and which ones were actually for her. Thinking flexibly was actually not a great thing because it meant that she could never pick a direction. So with everything, there is a bright side and a shadow side, and if one is too present in your life, it can sometimes have a shadow side. So she started to really think about her thinking and choose directions, and develop habits that she really felt would move her along, and help her to manage her impulsivity and be directive for herself. So that was a really surprising thing, actually. The other thing is that I teach classes for the local teacher center, and the classes I've been doing have really been how to work explicitly with kids who struggle in school. And these are not kids who have IEPs. These are kids who are just struggling with executive function. And so I brought Habits of Mind into that class, and I just introduced a mini course in Habits of Mind recently, because they said, do you have something for just a few weeks until the end of the year? And I was like, yeah, I've been working on this course for Habits of Mind. And so many of the people that I had as students in this teaching, the explicit teaching course, have signed up for the Habits of Mind. It's like there's some piece there that they really want to further explore. And that's been really interesting, so I can't wait to do that, starting this week. So I'm also teaching art at the local state university, and I'm starting to bring Habits of Mind into the studio, because I think the kids could really use it. And so it's making its way into all these different pathways.